Now, I want to talk about something called the anchoring bias. If you mention a price first, you put an anchor price in the customer's head. If the customer mentions a price first, they have the anchor. Now, there's an advantage and disadvantage depending on how it works. So, for example, let's say you're talking to a customer and you go first and you mention, our prices could be as high as $10,000. Customer hears that, it's like, wow, $10,000. Then you'll go through your presentation, and then finally, when you get to the specific product they want, you say, and this product right here, which fits your needs right now, is only $5,000. Now, in their mind, they were thinking $10,000, and when you told them it was only going to be $5,000, there's a sense of relief. And that's always a good situation to be in. So it's always good to mention a good high anchor and then knowing you're going to come down in price. So again, anchor high, and then you're going to provide a better price. So that's always a good situation. But what happens when the customer has a high anchor and then you're presenting your product, they're going, that's too much. For example, let's say that somewhere along the line, they say, you know what, the most I've ever paid for that product has been $5,000. In your mind, your product is $10,000. So now, one thing to keep in mind, you're not selling a $10,000 product. At this point, you're selling the difference, the $5,000. You're not selling a $10,000 product. At this point, you're selling the difference, the $5,000. Their anchor's at 5, you're at 10. We're trying to sell the difference here. So 3 ways you can approach this. One is you got to make sure it's an apples to apples comparison. Sometimes customers are comparing something that's very simplistic to something that's more sophisticated. So you got to make sure that you're asking the right questions to make sure it's an apples to apples comparison. Number 2, sometimes it's outdated pricing. In other words, the last time they got pricing on something like this was 5 or 10 years ago, and prices have changed dramatically. So make sure you're dealing with current price. And the last one is to really think about how do you position the value, because that's the trick. Sometimes the customer goes, I'm willing to pay 10, but I just don't see the value to get to 10. I believe it's worth 5,000, but I don't believe it's worth 10,000. So our job is to create what I call value lifters. And that is you start highlighting why your product or service will over time overcome that $5,000 differential. So again, when you're dealing with a customer, remember, if they mention price first, they set the anchor. If you mention price first, you set the anchor. And it's always best to set the anchor as opposed to having to respond to it. Because if you're explaining, you're always losing a conversation, in my opinion.